about the 310 mile range on the Model 3 long range. I know at this point they've got a couple trim options out with the long range, the dual motor, and the recently released mid range. At the time of recording this video, that's all that's out right now. And I'll tell you, I'm a new EV owner myself. I've been driving this for a little over a month at this point, and I've been following a couple forums. And one of the biggest complaints I've heard recently is people saying that they're not getting the 310-mile range if they got the long range model, of course. And a lot of people claiming that the range is a lie, that it doesn't even exist to get the car to 310 miles. So I just want to tell you from a month of driving the car myself, my observations. So first off, my previous car before this one was a Toyota Corolla. It was 8 or 9 years old, and it was a manual transmission. And I have the Model 3 long range with the all-wheel drive dual motor. That's what I got now. And this number one, my old car, the Corolla, it was purely gasoline, no hybrid. And my experience there was that I never tracked how much mileage I got per gallon. I would just generally fill it up when I was being responsible. I would fill it up when it got to a quarter tank. When I was being lazy or whatever else, I would wait until the light came on. But either way, I would fill up the tank. I'd put in just like probably a lot of you guys do. I would pay 30, $40, a little bit more than what I expected to use, and then get the change. It would take whatever it took, and generally speaking, I would glance at the odometer, make sure we got about what I was expecting, which in that particular car was about 300 miles on gas tank. And then I would go about my business. I never tracked it any more specifically than that. My other experience, I've never owned a hybrid car, but my experience with a lot of hybrid owners is that they kind of gamify it. They have this way to track how much efficiency they're using or when they're driving with the battery only or the gas or whatever. And a lot of times they will adjust their driving habits to be able to get more out of the battery component than the gasoline. And I think a lot of times for hybrid drivers, it's not even about saving money or using less gas or saving the environment. I think for them, it's more about the game of that it shows them how efficient they're driving and they want to drive more efficiently. So that's been my experience up until this point. The other thing I would say, and I'm going to talk about driving habits in the Tesla in a moment, what will get you more or less miles on a charge. But my experience with gasoline cars is that your mileage is affected by how you drive. I think it's common knowledge, right? That if you're sprinting off the line and slamming your brakes at a red light, you're going to get less miles per gallon than if you're driving responsibly. I'll leave it at that, right? And I think it's common knowledge that if you drive over 55 miles an hour, then every 5 miles an hour over 55, your gas mileage is going to go down. And if you're speeding around at 65, 70 plus, you're just not going to get the same kind of mileage. I think that's common and commonly accepted. I think where electric vehicles are experiencing a disconnect for the owners and the drivers is in two places. Number one, electric vehicles do better in city traffic, city driving, stop and go, than they do on highways that maintained long speeds, or high speeds rather, whereas a typical gasoline car will do the opposite. They do better on highways when they're maintaining a consistent speed. So I think a lot of times people that have been used to their cars performing more efficiently on the highway, they get an electric vehicle, they're less efficient on the highway. I think that's one of the main disconnects. And then I think the second thing, especially for Tesla drivers, is that the way that you drive greatly impacts your speed. Again, it's not different from a normal gasoline car. By the way, this also applies to diesel. But either way, it's normal in a traditional car, but an electric vehicle, especially a Tesla, they're fast. They're quick off the line. They're a joy and a pleasure to drive. And it's very tempting to slam on the gas a lot, or the accelerator, I guess is the more appropriate word. But it's tempting to slam on that thing a lot, and that's going to drive down your miles that you're going to get on a single charge. So here's been my experience. I'll tell you very openly. I've driven the car two different ways. The first way is just like any other car. For me personally, I live in a suburb and I do a lot of traveling. We do a lot of highway miles, and I haven't driven the car any differently from how I would my Toyota Corolla. For me personally, one of the biggest things I valued in even buying this particular car in the first place was that it was rated to get 310 miles on a charge. That was more or less what my Toyota Corolla would get. And I figured for me, that would make the shift to an electric vehicle a lot easier, a lot less range anxiety than going to an EV with only 100 miles or so on a charge. And also, we do, like I said, a lot of highway miles. And for me personally, I do travel 300 plus mile trips 4, 5, 6 times a year for work and for family. And so the ability to have the same kind of mileage on a charge was really important to me. So that informed my decision to get this particular model for me. But when I drive the car, like I said, I'm not changing my driving habits. I drive, that's a lie. The first 2 weeks, I was fast off the line all the time. For me personally, though, I found that after about 2 weeks of just racing all the time, I started driving the car a lot more normally. But that does mean also that I'm not driving it any more conservatively. I'm not trying to conserve my energy or drive slower or anything else. I'm doing my normal driving habits. And what I found is the other thing is that I really haven't tracked how much mileage I get per charge. I keep it. I'm not going to swivel. I'm driving, as you can tell. I'm not going to swivel the car to point at the screen right now for safety. But I keep it so it shows a percentage of charge versus how many miles, and I really haven't tracked it. The one thing I do know is that I've never felt worried about having enough charge or enough mileage to get to where I need to go or to get to a charging station. I've never once experienced the range anxiety with this model. And the other thing is, what is the other thing? There's another thing for sure. What's the other thing? Sorry, you can tell this is live, huh? Uh, Never had range anxiety. Oh, the other thing, I know, my electric bill really hasn't gone up significantly. We have a special rate plan with the utility for electric vehicle charging. It's cheaper overnight, and we charge at home. We've done a couple supercharger stops for the longer trips, but not generally. So either way, that's kind of been our experience. Is I haven't changed my driving habits and I've had no issue. That's really the bottom line. What I will tell you is I found recently there's an energy monitor in the car, and this one specifically, I'm sure most cars would have that at this point. But there's an energy usage monitor, and what I know is that if you want to get 310 miles on a charge, you need to be using around 238 watt hours per mile. That would be the number that gets you that magical 310 miles. When I'm driving without changing my driving habits, by the way, that does include, I like the seat heaters. My previous cars have never had that. I enjoy it. It's a luxury feature for me. Um, I also know, and I'll talk about this at the end, but one of the things that does use up energy in the car is using the air conditioning or the heater to change the temperature in the entire cabin. It's more efficient to just use the seat heaters than it is to heat the entire cabin. But I, like I said, haven't changed my habits. I use the heater. I like it to be a comfortable 70 to 73 degrees inside at all times. So I keep it that way, right? That uses a little bit more energy. Also, when I'm driving on the highway, the car is going to be most efficient when it's 55 miles an hour or under. But the highway speeds in my area are all 55 at a minimum. Several of them are 65 and 70. And of course, I can make a ton of excuses, but I don't like to drive the speed limit. I go 5 to 9 miles an hour generally over the speed limit. So I'm normally driving around between 64 and 79, right, miles an hour. Uh, and that, of course, makes the car less efficient. That said, I've only noticed about a 22% increase in how many watt hours per mile it's using. So it's 22% less efficient. In the grand scheme of things, that's not really a huge amount, to be honest. It's only 272 watt hours per mile is what I'm typically using. And then what I have found is if I'm blasting the heat or I'm driving fast or I'm accelerating quickly off the line, yeah, it uses more, but not enough that it's draining my battery so fast that I'm angry or upset about it. What I do know is that if you want to max out how many watt hours per mile or how many miles per charge you get, staying under 55 miles an hour helps. Using the regenerative braking instead of the manual brakes or the friction brakes definitely helps as well because that recharges your battery. Not using the cabin air at all or keeping it to a minimum would certainly do that. And then just being gentle with your acceleration and your slowing down would do that. That's really it. You know, you can definitely get the 310 miles. I've kept, by the way, the 238 hours, that magical number to get the 310 miles on a charge. I've had that numerous times without trying hard or doing anything special. But I found that generally speaking, I just don't care enough to really focus on that. I want to be comfortable. I want to enjoy my car. And I don't want to change my driving habits to accommodate an electric vehicle. I wanted to buy an electric vehicle that would accommodate my driving habits. But at the end of the day, the 310 miles per charge is real. You can definitely get that, and it's not difficult to get. But if you're driving aggressively or using a whole lot of the convenience features in the car, then obviously you're not going to get it. So that's the bottom line. I hope that's helpful to some of you guys, and I will talk to you again soon. See you.